Hey guys, tonight we're exploring a story that everyone in history should know. The story is how ancient Rome's elite stayed in power. You get comfortable, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. How ancient. Rome's elite stayed in power. There is a reason why the story of ancient Rome continues to fascinate people more than 2,000 years after its rise. Empires have come and gone. Kingdoms have risen and disappeared. Powerful rulers once believed they would reign forever, only to become forgotten names buried beneath dust and stone. Yet Rome remains different. Its roads, laws, architecture, military strategies, political ideas, and even its language continue to influence the modern world. But behind the magnificent temples, the towering monuments, the disciplined armies, and the glorious victories stood another story. It was a story few ordinary Romans truly understood. It was the story of the elite, the small group of powerful families who managed to remain at the top for generations, while millions of other people lived ordinary, difficult lives. When people imagine ancient Rome, they often picture fearless gladiators, fighting to the death, disciplined legionaries, marching across Europe, emperors wearing golden crowns, or senators debating inside marble halls. Those images are not entirely wrong, but they only reveal the surface of Roman civilization. The real engine that kept Rome running was power. Not military power alone, not political power alone, but a carefully constructed system that allowed a handful of families to influence nearly every aspect of Roman society. Power in Rome was never simply inherited. It had to be protected. It had to be expanded. It had to be defended against rivals inside the city, just as fiercely as enemies beyond its borders. Every election, every marriage, every military campaign, every religious ceremony, every public speech, every construction project, every law, everything connected back to one question: who would control Rome? Unlike many kingdoms where a single royal family ruled absolutely, Rome was far more complicated. Even during the Republic, when there was technically no king, a surprisingly small number of aristocratic families controlled politics for centuries. Their names appeared again and again in Roman history. Generation after generation, father after son, brother after brother, marriage after marriage, the same bloodlines remained close to power while new families struggled to break into their exclusive world. To outsiders, Rome often looked like a society where talented citizens could rise through ability and hard work. Romans themselves celebrated stories of courage, discipline, and public service. They proudly believed that great men earned greatness through virtue. Reality was much more complicated. Talent certainly mattered. Military victories mattered. Public popularity mattered. But none of those things were enough by themselves. Connections mattered more. Family reputation mattered more. Money mattered more. Loyal supporters mattered more. Understanding this hidden system is the key to understanding Rome itself. The Roman elite did not simply wake up one morning and decide they deserved power. They created traditions that justified it. They wrote laws that protected it. They built institutions that reinforced it. They educated their children specifically to maintain it. Even religion became one of their most valuable political tools. A young Roman noble was not simply raised to become wealthy. He was trained from childhood to command respect. He learned how to speak before crowds. He learned how to negotiate alliances. He learned how to read the emotions of ordinary citizens. He learned how to impress generals. He learned how to flatter senators. He learned when to show generosity. He learned when to show cruelty. He learned that appearances often mattered as much as reality. While poor children worried about finding enough food, elite children studied philosophy, rhetoric, history, law, and politics. Their education prepared them for leadership long before they entered public office. This difference created advantages that lasted for generations. One successful politician could establish a family reputation that benefited his grandchildren decades later. One victorious general could earn enough wealth to support an entire dynasty. One carefully arranged marriage could unite two powerful houses and reshape Roman politics. Power was never accidental. It was carefully cultivated. The Roman elite understood something that many modern societies still struggle with today. People rarely obey force forever. Eventually, armies become exhausted. Eventually, violence creates resistance. Eventually, fear fades. But if people believe the system itself is legitimate, they will often accept unequal power willingly. Rome mastered this principle. The elite rarely presented themselves as dictators. Instead, they described themselves as guardians of tradition, protectors of the republic, servants of the people, defenders of Roman values. Their speeches celebrated liberty. Their monuments honored patriotism. Their public ceremonies emphasized duty. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, political alliances were negotiated through private conversations, expensive gifts, strategic marriages, and promises of future support. Publicly, Rome admired competition. Privately, influential families often cooperated whenever their collective interests were threatened. This delicate balance made Roman politics incredibly sophisticated. Enemies today could become allies tomorrow. Friends today could become dangerous rivals next year. No alliance remained permanent. No victory guaranteed safety. Even the richest families constantly worried about losing influence. Power attracted enemies. Success created jealousy. Popularity inspired fear. The higher someone climbed, the more dangerous Roman politics became. Many ambitious politicians discovered this too late. History remembers famous names like Julius Caesar because they transformed Rome forever. But Caesar did not emerge from nowhere. He entered a political world already shaped by centuries of elite competition. Long before emperors ruled the Mediterranean, Aristocratic families had perfected methods for maintaining influence without wearing crowns. They understood that symbols could be stronger than weapons. A magnificent house overlooking the city announced status before its owner even spoke. A family funeral became an opportunity to remind citizens of generations of distinguished ancestors. Public games entertained the people while increasing political popularity. Temple donations displayed religious devotion while strengthening public reputation. Nothing happened by accident. Even generosity served political purposes. When wealthy Romans distributed food to hungry citizens, they gained gratitude. When they funded roads, aqueducts, or temples, they earned admiration. When they sponsored spectacular games, crowds remembered their names. Every act of generosity became an investment in future influence. Roman politicians understood something that modern public figures still understand remarkably well. People remember those who improved their daily lives. A politician who built a bridge might gain more lasting popularity than one who delivered brilliant speeches. Visible achievements mattered. This explains why Roman cities filled with monuments carrying the names of influential families. Every building became a permanent advertisement. Every statue reinforced prestige. Every inscription reminded future generations who deserved respect. The elite transformed architecture into political messaging. Even death became part of this system. Elite funerals were extraordinary public events. Masks representing famous ancestors were carried through the streets. Professional mourners increased emotional impact. Funeral speeches celebrated family achievements stretching back centuries. Young Romans watching these ceremonies learned an important lesson. Greatness belonged to certain families. Whether entirely true or not mattered very little. Perception shaped reality. This obsession with reputation explains why Roman nobles protected family honor so fiercely. Scandal threatened political careers. Cowardice destroyed respect. Financial failure damaged prestige. Every public action reflected upon the entire family. Success brought honor. Failure brought shame. As a result, elite Romans often accepted enormous personal risks to preserve family reputation. Military command offered opportunities for glory, but also terrible danger. Yet refusing command could appear cowardly. Political office promised influence, but invited powerful enemies. Every opportunity carried hidden risks. This constant competition created remarkable leaders. It also created ruthless survivors. Compassion rarely determined success. Calculation did. Roman politics rewarded patience. It rewarded intelligence. It rewarded adaptability. Perhaps most importantly, it rewarded those who understood people. Winning support required more than money. Successful politicians learned to read crowds. They adjusted speeches depending upon their audience. They spoke differently to soldiers than to senators. They addressed merchants differently than farmers. They mastered persuasion, because persuasion could achieve victories that armies sometimes could not. The greatest Roman speakers became almost as influential as famous generals. Words shaped elections. Words justified wars. Words defended unpopular decisions. Words transformed ambitious politicians into national heroes. Behind every successful Roman leader stood years of careful preparation. Nothing about elite life was casual. Children inherited expectations alongside wealth. A noble family expected its sons to surpass previous generations. Failure disappointed not only living relatives, but the memory of famous ancestors. Imagine growing up surrounded by portraits of victorious generals, respected senators, celebrated magistrates, and honored statesmen. Every meal reminded you of family history. Every visitor expected greatness. Every conversation emphasized duty. This environment produced extraordinary confidence. It also produced relentless pressure. Many elite Romans spent their entire lives chasing the achievements of long-dead ancestors. Some succeeded. Others failed spectacularly. Yet the system endured. Even when individual families disappeared, new ambitious houses adopted the same traditions. The methods remained stronger than the people themselves. That may be Rome's greatest secret. The empire was never built solely by brilliant individuals. It was sustained by institutions, traditions, relationships, and unwritten rules that taught each generation how power truly worked. Ordinary Romans often saw only the public performances, the speeches, ceremonies, triumphs, elections, and celebrations. Behind those performances existed an invisible network connecting wealth, influence, loyalty, religion, family, and ambition. Understanding that hidden network reveals why Rome dominated the Mediterranean for centuries. It also explains why so many ambitious men sacrificed everything to join the ranks of the elite. For them, power was not simply about luxury. It meant immortality, to have your name remembered, to have your family honored, to shape history itself. And in ancient Rome, there was no prize greater than that. Patricians, noble bloodlines, and the foundations of aristocratic power. To understand how Rome's elite stayed in power, we must begin long before marble temples covered the hills of the city, before mighty legions conquered distant lands, and before emperors ruled over millions of people. The foundations of Roman power were laid during a much simpler time when Rome was little more than a growing settlement beside the Tiber River. According to Roman tradition, the city was founded in 753 BC by Romulus. Whether every detail of that story is true remains uncertain. But what matters is how the Romans understood their own beginnings. From the earliest days, society was divided into groups that were far from equal. A small number of families claimed that their ancestors had stood beside the founders of the city itself. These families became known as the patricians. Their status was not simply based on wealth. It was based on ancestry. They believed their bloodlines connected them to the very birth of Rome. This belief gave them something more valuable than money. It gave them legitimacy. In a world where tradition mattered more than written constitutions, claiming descent from Rome's earliest leaders carried enormous weight. People respected ancient families because they believed those families had always guided the city through times of danger and prosperity. Whether every claim was true mattered less than whether people believed it. Over time, these noble families built an identity that separated them from everyone else. Their names became symbols of prestige. Their ancestors became legends. Their homes displayed reminders of generations of public service, military victories, and political success. Children born into these families inherited more than property. They inherited expectations. From an early age, they learned that they belonged to a special class. They were taught that their family had responsibilities ordinary Romans could never understand. Leadership was presented not merely as a privilege, but as a duty passed down through generations. Young boys listened as their fathers described famous ancestors who had defended Rome against enemies, negotiated peace, or held the highest public offices. These stories were repeated again and again until family history became part of their identity. Failure, therefore, was not simply personal. It dishonored centuries of family achievement. This constant pressure shaped ambitious, disciplined individuals who believed they were destined to lead. Yet Rome was never composed only of patricians. Most citizens belonged to another group known as the plebeians. They farmed the land, worked as craftsmen, traded in markets, and served in the army. Many were hardworking and talented, but they lacked the social advantages enjoyed by the old aristocratic families. For centuries, the gap between these two groups defined Roman politics. The patricians controlled many of the highest offices, dominated religious positions, and influenced the Senate. Their authority seemed almost natural because it had existed for so long. But Rome was changing. As the city expanded, wealth began to spread beyond the old, noble families. Successful merchants, landowners, and military commanders from plebeian backgrounds accumulated fortunes of their own. They possessed money, education, and ambition. What they lacked was status. This created tension. Why should birth matter more than ability? Why should ancient family names outweigh military courage or economic success? These questions became increasingly difficult to ignore. The struggle between patricians and plebeians lasted for generations. Ordinary citizens demanded greater political rights, legal protections, and access to public office. At times, they even refused military service until reforms were granted. The elite could not simply ignore these demands. Rome depended on its citizens to fight wars, cultivate fields, and sustain the economy. Alienating the majority threatened the city's survival. Gradually, compromises emerged. Plebeians gained representatives known as tribunes. Laws became more transparent. Some political offices eventually opened to non-patricians. These reforms appeared revolutionary, yet they did not destroy elite power. Instead, the elite adapted. That ability to adapt became one of the greatest strengths of Rome's ruling class. Rather than resisting every change, they accepted enough reform to preserve the overall system. New families could rise, but only by adopting the values, customs, and expectations of the existing aristocracy. In effect, the ruling class expanded without losing control. a wealthy plebeian who entered politics, soon discovered that success required forming alliances with established noble families. Marriage, friendship, military service, and shared political interests gradually tied newcomers into the old elite network. The system absorbed talented outsiders instead of allowing them to replace it. This flexibility helped Rome avoid many revolutions that destroyed other ancient societies. Bloodlines remained important, but they were no longer the only path to influence. Reputation became equally valuable. A family that produced outstanding generals, honest magistrates, or celebrated statesmen could gradually earn respect equal to the oldest aristocratic houses. Yet even then, progress required generations. Rome valued continuity. One brilliant politician might gain temporary fame. A family that served Rome faithfully for a century gained lasting prestige. This long-term thinking separated Roman politics from simple ambition. Elite families planned not merely for their own careers, but for the success of children and grandchildren they might never meet. Marriages reflected this strategy. Love rarely determined aristocratic marriages. Political advantage did. A marriage could unite rival families, strengthen alliances, expand property, or secure future influence. Young men and women understood that their personal lives often served larger family goals. Every wedding could reshape political relationships. Every child represented another link in a chain stretching across generations. Property also played a crucial role. Land was the greatest source of wealth in the ancient world. Owning fertile farmland meant controlling food production, employing laborers, collecting income, and financing political careers. Elite families invested heavily in estates throughout Italy. These vast properties generated wealth year after year, allowing aristocrats to survive temporary political setbacks without losing their social standing. A poor politician quickly disappeared from public life. A wealthy landowner could wait patiently for another opportunity. Money bought time. Time preserved influence. The Roman elite also understood the importance of visibility. Their homes were designed not only for comfort, but for prestige. Visitors entering an aristocratic house encountered impressive architecture, valuable artwork, family portraits, and displays celebrating ancestral achievements. Every detail communicated status. Clients, business partners, political allies, and ordinary citizens left with a clear impression. This was a family accustomed to power. Mourning rituals reinforced these relationships. Each day, clients gathered outside the homes of influential nobles to pay their respects. In return, patrons offered legal assistance, financial support, recommendations, or other forms of protection. This exchange created bonds of loyalty, extending throughout Roman society. A powerful aristocrat was rarely powerful alone. He stood at the center of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of personal relationships. Each client represented another vote, another supporter, another voice spreading his reputation. Power multiplied through networks, rather than force alone. Religion further strengthened elite authority. Many important priesthoods remained closely associated with aristocratic families. Religious ceremonies reinforced the belief that Rome prospered because its leaders enjoyed divine favor. Political leadership and religious leadership often overlapped. This combination made challenging elite authority appear almost disrespectful to the gods themselves. Tradition became a powerful shield. Whenever ambitious reformers proposed dramatic changes, conservative politicians often claimed they were defending ancestral customs rather than protecting personal privilege. The language of tradition proved remarkably persuasive. People feared uncertainty. Ancient customs offered stability. Elite politicians repeatedly presented themselves as guardians of Rome's sacred heritage. Whether motivated by genuine belief or political calculation, the effect remained the same. Their authority appeared rooted in history itself. Military service provided another avenue for aristocratic influence. Young nobles often began their public careers by serving as officers. Successful campaigns brought glory, wealth, and popularity. Victorious commanders returned home surrounded by cheering crowds, captured treasures, and loyal soldiers. Military success transformed promising young aristocrats into national heroes. These victories strengthened not only individuals, but entire families. One famous general elevated the prestige of generations to come. As Rome expanded across Italy and beyond, opportunities multiplied. New provinces generated taxes. Victories produced slaves. Trade enriched merchants. Land acquisitions increased agricultural production. The elite benefited enormously from this expansion. Each conquest created fresh opportunities for wealth and influence. At the same time, Roman society became increasingly competitive. Dozens of ambitious nobles sought the same prestigious offices. They competed through speeches, generosity, military achievement, and public service. Open rivalry encouraged excellence while ensuring the politics remained dominated by those possessing the resources to compete effectively. Ordinary citizens could admire these contests, but only a small number possessed the education, wealth, and connections necessary to participate. The appearance of competition concealed the stability of elite rule. Different families might exchange offices. Different politicians might win elections. But the broader system remained remarkably consistent. Generation after generation, power circulated within a relatively small circle. This continuity gave Rome extraordinary resilience. Even after political crises, civil wars, or foreign invasions, experienced aristocratic families often retained enough influence to rebuild institutions and restore stability. They understood government because governing had become their family profession. Their sons inherited practical knowledge alongside political ambition. By the time a young noble entered public life, he had spent years observing negotiations, legal disputes, religious ceremonies, elections, and military planning. Politics was not new to him. It was the environment in which he had been raised. For outsiders, this experience proved difficult to match. Talent alone rarely equaled decades of preparation. This invisible advantage helped the Roman elite remain dominant long after legal barriers between patricians and plebeians had weakened. by adapting to change, welcoming exceptional newcomers, preserving family traditions, and building powerful networks of loyalty. Rome's aristocracy created one of history's most durable ruling classes. Their greatest strength was not simply wealth. It was their ability to convince society that their leadership was both natural and necessary. That belief would shape Roman history for centuries. Wealth, land, and the invisible empire of money power in ancient Rome did not begin in the Senate. It did not begin on the battlefield. It did not even begin inside the magnificent temples that overlooked the city. True power began with something far less dramatic: land. To a Roman aristocrat, land was far more than property. It represented security, influence, prestige, and the promise that a family's name would survive for generations. A politician could lose an election. A general could lose a battle. An emperor could fall from power. But a family that owned enormous estates possessed something that was much harder to destroy: a permanent source of wealth. This simple reality shaped Roman society from its earliest days. As Rome expanded across Italy, victorious armies seized farmland from defeated enemies. Some of that land was distributed to citizens, but the largest and most fertile estates often found their way into the hands of wealthy families. The rich became richer. The powerful became more powerful, and each new conquest widened the gap between the elite and everyone else. To understand how Rome's elite stayed in power, imagine two young Roman men beginning their adult lives. One is the son of a wealthy senator, the other is the son of a poor farmer. Both may be intelligent, both may be courageous, both may dream of serving Rome, but their opportunities are completely different before either of them takes a single step. The senator's son grows up in a spacious villa surrounded by tutors, servants, and influential visitors. He studies literature, philosophy, law, history, and public speaking. He learns Greek as well as Latin. Every dinner introduces him to governors, generals, judges, and politicians. His father's friends become his future allies. His family's reputation opens doors that remain permanently closed to ordinary Romans. The farmer's son experiences another world entirely. His childhood is filled with physical labor. He rises before sunrise. He works in fields under the burning Mediterranean sun. Every failed harvest threatens the family's survival. Education is limited. Political connections are almost non-existent. His greatest concern is whether the next season will provide enough food. Neither boy chose the family into which he was born. Yet one inherits opportunity while the other inherits struggle. The Roman elite understood this better than anyone. That is why they invested so heavily in preserving family wealth. Money itself mattered, but wealth alone was never enough. It had to be transformed into influence. Large agricultural estates produced enormous harvests of wheat, olives, grapes, and livestock. These products supplied cities, armies, and foreign markets. Every successful harvest increased aristocratic fortunes. As their income grew, they purchased even more land. The cycle repeated itself generation after generation. Eventually, some noble families controlled estates stretching across multiple regions of Italy. Others expanded into newly conquered provinces. Their wealth became almost unimaginable. Yet surprisingly, many Roman elites avoided appearing obsessed with money. Open greed damaged a politician's reputation. Romans admired generosity more than luxury, at least in public. This created an interesting contradiction. Elite families accumulated enormous fortunes, but they often displayed their wealth through acts that appeared selfless. A wealthy senator might finance a public bathhouse. Another might repair a road. Someone else might sponsor a temple. These projects benefited ordinary citizens. Crowds praised the donor. His reputation grew. His political influence expanded. The money never truly disappeared. It simply changed form. Instead of sitting inside a treasury, it became public admiration. Roman politicians knew that gratitude could be even more valuable than gold. People remembered generosity, especially when elections approached. This practice became so common that public building projects turned into political advertisements carved in stone. Walk through almost any Roman city, and you would encounter inscriptions announcing exactly who had funded each structure. A bridge, an aqueduct, a marketplace, a theater, a fountain. Every monument quietly repeated the same message. This family serves Rome. This family deserves respect. This family deserves power. Even centuries later, archaeologists continue finding these inscriptions across the former Roman world. They reveal something important. Roman elites did not merely spend money, they invested in memory. Another source of wealth came from conquest. Every successful military campaign produced incredible rewards. Captured treasure flowed into Rome. Gold, silver, weapons, artwork, livestock, and countless enslaved people. Roman generals often received a share of this wealth. Successful campaigns transformed ambitious commanders into some of the richest men in history. Julius Caesar provides one famous example. His victories in Gaul brought extraordinary riches. Those resources helped finance political campaigns, reward loyal supporters, and strengthen his influence throughout Rome. Military glory and financial power became inseparable. Victorious generals rarely returned home poor. War itself became an economic opportunity. But wealth did not simply create comfort. It created dependence. Thousands of ordinary Romans relied upon elite families for employment. Farm workers cultivated aristocratic estates. Craftsmen completed construction projects. Merchants transported agricultural products. Household servants maintained luxurious homes. Teachers educated noble children. Secretaries managed business affairs. Lawyers defended clients. Doctors treated family members. A single wealthy household supported an entire network of workers. Those workers naturally preferred stability. If their patron remained successful, their own livelihoods remained secure. Economic relationships gradually evolved into political loyalty. This system expanded through something uniquely Roman: patronage. Every morning before sunrise, influential Romans opened their homes to visitors. Some came seeking financial assistance, others requested legal advice. Some wanted employment, others hoped for political recommendations. The patron listened. He offered help whenever possible. In return, clients demonstrated loyalty. They accompanied him through the streets. They praised him publicly. They voted for him during elections. They supported his family. This relationship was neither friendship nor simple business. It represented mutual obligation. The richer a patron became, the larger his network of loyal clients. The larger his network, the greater his political influence. Money created loyalty. Loyalty created power. Power created more opportunities for wealth. The cycle strengthened itself continuously. Elite women also played important economic roles, although history often pays more attention to their husbands and fathers. Many aristocratic women managed household finances, supervised estates, arranged marriages, and protected family property. Widows sometimes controlled enormous fortunes. Their decisions affected inheritance, business partnerships, and political alliances. Behind many successful Roman politicians stood families whose wealth had been carefully managed for generations. Financial discipline mattered as much as political ambition. The elite also understood risk. Not every investment succeeded. Harvests sometimes failed. Ships carrying valuable cargo disappeared during storms. Foreign provinces occasionally revolted. Political enemies confiscated property. Economic disasters could destroy even wealthy families. For this reason, Roman aristocrats diversified their wealth. They owned farmland, urban houses, rental properties, mining operations, commercial partnerships, shipping interests, loans. Investments spread across multiple regions. If one source of income declined, another often continued producing profits. This strategy protected dynasties against temporary setbacks. Ordinary farmers rarely possessed such security. One failed harvest might ruin an entire family. Elite households usually survived. Because wealth survived, influence survived as well. Education reinforced these advantages. Young aristocrats learned accounting alongside philosophy, estate management alongside public speaking, legal procedure alongside military leadership. Running vast agricultural enterprises required organization. Managing hundreds of workers required discipline. Collecting taxes demanded careful administration. These practical skills prepared elite Romans to govern provinces later in life. Their private business experience became public administrative experience. Again, opportunity multiplied itself. Money purchased education. Education improved leadership. Leadership secured political office. Political office generated new wealth. The entire system reinforced elite dominance. Rome celebrated merit. But merit functioned most effectively when supported by inherited advantages. This does not mean every aristocrat succeeded. Some wasted fortunes through gambling or extravagance. Others accumulated crushing debts. Ambition itself proved expensive. Political campaigns required lavish spending. Public games cost fortunes. Construction projects demanded enormous investment. Maintaining prestige consumed incredible resources. A poor noble risked humiliation. An indebted politician became vulnerable to manipulation. Many ambitious Romans borrowed heavily, hoping future success would repay today's expenses. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it ended in disaster. Debt became another invisible weapon inside Roman politics. Powerful creditors could influence desperate politicians. Financial obligations shaped political alliances. Economic dependence translated into political dependence. Nothing remained entirely separate. Money influenced law. Law influenced politics. Politics influenced military command. Military victories generated more wealth. Everything connected. Perhaps that was the greatest financial secret of Rome's ruling class. They rarely viewed wealth as a final goal. They viewed it as fuel. Fuel for influence. Fuel for reputation. Fuel for future generations. Every estate, every investment, every profitable partnership strengthened the foundations beneath their political authority. Ordinary citizens often noticed only the luxurious villas, expensive clothing, and extravagant banquets. They saw the visible rewards. They rarely saw the invisible machinery producing those rewards. Account books, estate managers, tenant farmers, commercial contracts, loans, harvest reports, shipping schedules, tax records. Behind every famous senator stood an economic empire, quietly generating the resources needed to sustain his family's position. Long before modern corporations or multinational businesses existed, Rome's aristocracy had already mastered the art of transforming economic power into political dominance. They understood a timeless truth. A politician with empty pockets could inspire crowds for a season. A family with endless wealth could shape history for centuries. And in ancient Rome, history almost always favored those who could afford to write it. How Rome's elite controlled the republic without wearing crowns. If a traveler had arrived in Rome during the height of the Republic and asked a simple question, "Who rules Rome?" the answer would not have been easy. There was no king, no royal palace, no golden throne standing above the city. Unlike many ancient kingdoms, Rome proudly claimed that it had rejected monarchy forever. According to Roman tradition, the last king had been expelled centuries earlier, and the people swore they would never again allow one man to wear a crown. To many citizens, this was proof that Rome was free. But appearances can be deceiving. Although Rome had no king, it possessed something far more sophisticated. It had the Senate. At first glance, the Senate did not look like the government of an empire. It passed no laws in the modern sense. Its members were not elected directly to serve as senators. It had no permanent army under its command. Yet for centuries, almost every important decision flowed through it. Foreign policy, military strategy, state finances, provincial administration, religious ceremonies, diplomatic negotiations. Even when officials technically possessed greater legal authority, they often hesitated to ignore the wishes of the Senate. Its power rested not only on law, it rested on prestige. The Roman word auctoritas described a form of influence that cannot easily be translated into English. It meant respect earned through experience, reputation, tradition, and public trust. A senator might not be able to order everyone to obey him, but his opinion carried enormous weight because society believed it should. This invisible authority proved stronger than many written laws. Membership in the Senate was not random. Most senators came from wealthy aristocratic families that had already produced successful politicians or military commanders. A young noble rarely dreamed merely of becoming rich. His greatest ambition was to enter the Senate. Doing so meant that his family had reached the highest level of Roman public life. The Senate itself became a club unlike any other. Its members debated for hours, sometimes for days. Every speech mattered, every alliance mattered, every vote mattered. Behind the formal discussions lay years of friendship, rivalry, family connections, and personal ambition. No senator entered the chamber alone. He carried the interests of his family, his supporters, his clients, and his political allies with him. Every decision affected hundreds or even thousands of people connected to his household. This made Roman politics extraordinarily complex. One proposal could unite old enemies. Another could divide lifelong friends. The Senate was not a place where everyone agreed. It was a battlefield fought with words instead of swords. Great orators became legendary. A powerful speech could change the course of Roman history. Young aristocrats spent years mastering rhetoric because they understood that persuasion often achieved what violence could not. Speaking clearly was not enough. A senator had to appear confident without seeming arrogant, wise without sounding weak, patriotic without appearing ambitious. Every word required careful balance. One mistake could destroy a reputation built over decades. This intense competition created remarkable political skill. Roman senators became experts at negotiation. They knew when to compromise, when to remain silent, when to praise an opponent, when to attack. Sometimes the most successful politician was not the loudest voice in the chamber, but the man quietly building alliances behind closed doors. Private conversations often mattered more than public debates. Before major meetings, influential senators visited one another's homes. They shared meals, discussed strategy, promised support, negotiated compromises. By the time official debates began, many important decisions had already been shaped in private. The public saw dramatic speeches. The real politics often happened elsewhere. This pattern repeated itself year after year. Ambitious young politicians quickly learned an important lesson. Winning arguments mattered. Winning allies mattered even more. No senator succeeded entirely alone. Every career depended upon friendships carefully cultivated over decades. Marriage strengthened these networks. If two powerful families became connected through marriage, political cooperation often followed. Business partnerships reinforced trust. Military campaigns created lifelong friendships between commanders. Shared religious duties deepened personal bonds. Roman elite society resembled a vast web in which nearly everyone important knew everyone else. Breaking into this network proved extremely difficult. Even talented outsiders struggled because they lacked generations of established relationships. The Senate also controlled something that ordinary citizens rarely noticed: information. Governors stationed in distant provinces regularly reported to senators. Military commanders sent updates from foreign campaigns. Ambassadors delivered intelligence about neighboring kingdoms. Merchants carried news from every corner of the Mediterranean. Because senators received this information first, they understood developments long before the general public. Knowledge became another source of power. A senator who understood an approaching crisis could prepare while others remained unaware. He could adjust political strategies, strengthen alliances, protect investments, or influence decisions before rivals recognized the danger. Information shaped opportunity. Another advantage came through experience. Many senators had already served in multiple public offices before joining the Senate permanently. They had governed provinces, commanded armies, supervised courts, managed public finances. They understood how the machinery of government actually worked. This practical knowledge made them indispensable. Young magistrates often relied upon older senators for advice. Even ambitious politicians who disliked the Senate frequently depended upon its experience. Respect reinforced authority. Authority reinforced influence. The Senate also supervised Rome's expanding empire. As Roman territories stretched across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East, governing became increasingly complicated. Someone had to appoint governors, allocate military resources, collect taxes, respond to rebellions, negotiate treaties, coordinate massive public projects. The Senate gradually became the administrative heart of this enormous system. Thousands of decisions passed through its members every year. Most never appeared in dramatic historical stories, yet together they determined how the empire functioned. Roads were built, ports expanded, cities founded, colonies established, taxes collected, laws interpreted. The empire operated because experienced administrators quietly managed countless practical problems. Many belonged to the Senate. Ordinary Romans admired military heroes. But experienced senators understood another truth. Empires are not held together by victories alone. They survive through administration. A conquered province that produced stable tax revenue proved more valuable than a battlefield triumph that created endless rebellion. Practical government mattered. Elite families recognized this. That is why they trained sons not only to fight wars, but also to understand law, finance, diplomacy, and administration. Leadership required many skills. Military courage represented only one of them. Of course, the Senate was far from perfect. Corruption existed. Personal rivalries sometimes overshadowed national interests. Wealthy governors occasionally exploited provinces for personal gain. Political friendships occasionally became opportunities for bribery. Ambition sometimes defeated principle. Roman historians themselves complained about these problems. Even respected senators admitted that greed threatened the republic. Yet despite its flaws, the Senate remained remarkably durable. Its traditions survived generation after generation because they adapted whenever circumstances changed. When new provinces required administration, the Senate expanded its responsibilities. When military crises emerged, experienced commanders assumed leadership. When economic problems developed, financial reforms were debated. The institution evolved continuously. Perhaps the greatest strength of the Senate was that it rarely depended upon one individual. Great politicians came and went. Influential families rose and declined. Exceptional speakers gained fame before fading into history. The Senate endured. Its customs outlived personalities. This continuity created stability. Citizens trusted institutions because they had survived previous crises. Ironically, the very success of the Senate eventually created new dangers. Some politicians became so wealthy, so popular, and so militarily successful that they overshadowed the institution itself. Their personal influence rivaled the collective authority of hundreds of senators, men like Gaius Marius, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, Pompey the Great, and eventually Julius Caesar. Each demonstrated that extraordinary individuals could challenge even Rome's oldest political traditions. The Senate struggled to respond. Its members feared dictatorship, yet they also feared losing control over ambitious generals commanding loyal armies. This tension gradually pushed the Republic towards civil war. The institution that had preserved aristocratic rule for centuries now faced its greatest test. Could an ancient system built upon shared elite leadership survive the ambitions of men who desired absolute power? That question would transform Rome forever. But before Rome reached that turning point, its elite relied on another invisible weapon. One that reached into every neighborhood, every village, every marketplace, and every household. It was not an army. It was not a law. It was not even money alone. It was a network of personal loyalty so powerful that it shaped the daily lives of millions. The Romans called this relationship patronage. It would become one of the greatest secrets behind the endurance of Rome's ruling class, the invisible network that kept Rome's elite in power. Power in ancient Rome was rarely exercised through force alone. A senator could command respect. A general could command soldiers. A magistrate could enforce the law. But none of these positions guaranteed lasting influence. Real power depended on something much more personal: loyalty. Not loyalty created through fear. Not loyalty bought for a single day, but loyalty built over years, sometimes generations. This system became known as patronage, and it was one of the most important reasons Rome's elite remained powerful for centuries. To modernize, patronage can seem strange. It was not exactly friendship, and it was not simply business. It was a relationship based on mutual obligation. One person possessed wealth, influence, education, or political connections. The other needed assistance. Each had something the other wanted. The patron offered protection, opportunities, legal advice, financial help, introductions, or employment. The client offered loyalty, support, respect, public praise, political votes, and when necessary, personal service. This exchange formed countless invisible connections throughout Roman society. Imagine walking through Rome just before sunrise. The streets are unusually quiet. Shopkeepers are only beginning to prepare for the day. Bakers are removing fresh loaves from hot ovens. The smell of bread drifts through narrow streets. In front of the homes of powerful aristocrats, small crowds begin to gather. Some visitors wear simple clothing. Others are merchants. Some are former soldiers. Some are craftsmen. Some are young men hoping to begin political careers. Each has come for the same reason, to greet his patron. This daily ritual became known as the salutatio. One by one, clients entered the house. They offered respectful greetings. The patron welcomed them. Sometimes he listened to legal disputes. Sometimes he gave financial assistance. Sometimes he wrote letters of recommendation. Sometimes he arranged introductions to influential officials. Occasionally, he simply offered advice. These meetings rarely lasted long. Yet together they reinforced relationships that could continue for decades. The clients left knowing that someone powerful stood behind them. The patron left knowing that dozens, sometimes hundreds of people remained loyal to his family. It was an extraordinary system. No police officer forced these people to appear. No law required these meetings. Custom alone kept the tradition alive. Honor mattered. Reputation mattered. Reciprocity mattered. A generous patron became famous. A loyal client earned trust. Both benefited. The influence of a powerful patron extended far beyond his own household. If a merchant needed permission for a business venture, he might ask his patron for assistance. If a young lawyer hoped to build a career, he often relied on introductions arranged by an influential family. If someone faced a difficult court case, a respected patron could recommend skilled advocates or speak on his behalf. Connections opened doors that ability alone sometimes could not. The Roman elite understood a simple truth. People rarely forgot kindness, especially kindness offered during moments of hardship. A loan during a bad harvest, legal assistance during a dispute, help finding employment, support after military service. These favors created obligations that often lasted for life. The children of loyal clients frequently became clients themselves. In this way, patronage passed from one generation to the next. Entire families developed long-standing relationships with aristocratic households. Some remained connected for centuries. This continuity strengthened elite power enormously. A senator entering an election did not begin by convincing strangers. He already possessed a vast network of people who knew his family personally. Many had received help from his father, or his grandfather, or even earlier ancestors. Votes were influenced long before election day arrived. Patronage reached into nearly every part of Roman life. Business, law, religion, military service, marriage, politics, education. Everywhere people depended upon relationships. Trust became a form of currency. A respected recommendation carried tremendous weight. Imagine receiving a letter signed by one of Rome's most influential senators. That single document might secure employment, settle disputes, or open opportunities unavailable to others. The patron's reputation became your passport. Elite families carefully protected that reputation. They did not recommend just anyone. Supporting dishonest individuals could damage their own standing. Therefore, choosing clients required judgment. A loyal, hard-working client reflected well upon his patron. An unreliable one created embarrassment. Mutual dependence encouraged responsible behavior on both sides. Patronage also shaped Roman elections. Candidates rarely campaigned in the modern sense. Instead, they relied heavily upon personal networks. Every client represented another potential vote, another supporter walking beside the candidate through crowded streets, another voice praising his achievements. Crowds themselves influenced public opinion. A politician surrounded by loyal followers appeared popular. Popularity attracted additional supporters. Success often created more success. The Roman elite understood the power of appearances. If hundreds of people accompanied a senator through the forum, ordinary citizens noticed. Even those unfamiliar with the politician assumed he must be important. Visible loyalty became political advertising. This explains why influential Romans valued large groups of followers. The number of people walking beside them quietly communicated status. Military service strengthened patronage even further. Young officers often served under experienced commanders. Victorious generals rewarded brave soldiers. Land grants, money, recommendations, public praise. Many veterans remained personally loyal to commanders long after military campaigns ended. Some followed them into politics. Others defended their reputations in public debates. The relationship between commander and soldier often resembled the relationship between patron and client. Shared hardship created lasting bonds. As Rome expanded, patronage spread across the Mediterranean. Provincial governors developed networks among local leaders. Merchants established partnerships with influential Roman families. Foreign kings cultivated friendships with senators capable of influencing Roman policy. The entire empire gradually became connected through overlapping circles of obligation and loyalty. Power traveled along these invisible pathways. Not every relationship was equal. Some patrons possessed only a handful of clients. Others commanded astonishing networks, reaching into every level of society. A truly influential aristocrat might know governors in distant provinces, military commanders stationed on frontiers, judges, priests, merchants, bankers, scholars, craftsmen, ship owners. Every connection increased his ability to solve problems. Every solved problem strengthened his reputation. This reputation attracted even more clients. The system expanded naturally. Elite women also participated in patronage, though often less publicly. Aristocratic women arranged marriages, supported relatives, introduced promising young people to influential families, managed charitable activities, protected widows and orphans, connected to their households. Many exercised considerable influence behind the scenes. Their networks complemented those of husbands, fathers, and brothers. Together, aristocratic families created vast webs of personal relationships stretching across Roman society. Patronage also softened social tensions. Poor citizens who lacked wealth still possessed access to powerful protectors. Successful patrons gained admiration for generosity. This mutual dependence reduced open conflict. Rather than viewing aristocrats solely as distant rulers, many ordinary Romans knew influential families personally, at least through the patron-client relationship. Of course, the system had weaknesses. Clients sometimes expected more assistance than patrons wished to provide. Patrons occasionally exploited loyal followers for political purposes. Promises were broken, friendships dissolved. Ambitious politicians competed fiercely for influential supporters. Not every relationship survived changing circumstances. Yet remarkably, the overall structure endured, because it benefited both sides. Even emperors later adopted similar practices. They became patrons on a far greater scale. They rewarded senators, military officers, cities, entire provinces. Imperial generosity created imperial loyalty. The same principles that had sustained aristocratic families during the Republic now helped sustain the empire itself. Perhaps the greatest strength of patronage was psychological. People are more willing to support institutions when those institutions have a human face. A distant government may seem cold. An influential patron who knows your name feels different. He becomes part of your daily life, your successes, your failures, your hopes. The Roman elite mastered this human dimension of power. They understood that influence did not flow only through official offices. It flowed through conversations, acts of generosity, shared meals, letters, recommendations, family friendships, personal trust. Long before modern political parties, corporations, or social media networks existed, Rome's aristocracy had built one of history's most sophisticated systems of personal influence. It required patience, memory, reciprocity, and above all, reputation. A family's greatest treasure was not always its gold, nor its land, nor its magnificent villas. It was the loyalty of people who believed that supporting that family would improve their own future. That belief could survive elections, economic crises, military defeats, even the deaths of individual leaders. Because loyalty, once deeply rooted, often outlived the people who first created it. And so, while outsiders admired Rome's mighty legions and magnificent monuments, the true foundation of elite power often remained invisible. It walked quietly through the streets each morning. It greeted patrons with respect. It exchanged favors for loyalty. And it quietly held the Republic together. Yet even this powerful network would not have endured without another essential pillar of Roman elite society, the family itself. Not simply parents and children, but entire dynasties that measured success not in years, but in centuries. For Rome's ruling class, every child represented another chance to preserve power, expand influence, and ensure that a famous name would never be forgotten. How Rome's great houses passed power from generation to generation. In ancient Rome, an individual could become famous. A victorious general could earn glory. A gifted speaker could capture the attention of thousands. A successful politician could reach the highest offices of the Republic. But for Rome's elite, personal success was never the ultimate goal. The true objective was something much greater: to ensure that the family remained powerful long after its current members were gone. Roman aristocrats rarely thought only about their own lives. They thought in generations. Every decision they made was measured by one question: will this strengthen the family? A marriage was not simply the union of two people. It was the union of two dynasties. A military victory was not merely personal glory. It elevated the reputation of every relative. A political failure did not embarrass one man alone. It stained the honor of ancestors and threatened the future of descendants. Family was the center of Roman elite life. To understand this, imagine entering the home of one of Rome's oldest aristocratic families. The entrance hall is decorated with impressive statues, expensive artwork, and finely crafted furniture. But the most important objects are not the luxurious decorations. They are the ancestral portraits, the faces of fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, men who had served as consuls, generals, priests, governors, and senators. Every portrait told a story. Every story reminded young members of the household that they belonged to something larger than themselves. A Roman noble child did not grow up asking, "What do I want to become?" Instead, he learned to ask, "What does my family expect of me?" Those expectations were enormous. From an early age, boys watched their fathers meet clients every morning. They observed political discussions during family dinners. They listened quietly while experienced senators debated law, military campaigns, and foreign affairs. Education extended far beyond books. The household itself became a political school. Every visitor offered another lesson. Every conversation revealed another piece of Rome's complicated world. Girls born into aristocratic families also carried great responsibility. Although Roman society limited many of their public roles, elite women exercised considerable influence within their families. They supervised households, managed finances, raised future leaders, maintained relationships between powerful families, and perhaps most importantly, they became central figures in political marriages. Marriage in Rome was rarely based on romance alone. Affection certainly existed. Many couples genuinely cared for one another. But among the elite, marriage almost always served larger purposes. A union between two noble families could end long-standing rivalries, strengthen political alliances, combine enormous estates, or create opportunities for future generations. Before a wedding took place, both families carefully considered the advantages. Would this alliance increase influence? Would it improve social standing? Would it produce heirs capable of continuing the family tradition? Personal happiness mattered, but family success mattered more. This practical approach often surprised foreigners visiting Rome, yet Romans viewed it as entirely natural. Marriage represented an alliance between households, not merely individuals. Children born from these unions inherited far more than wealth. They inherited names, connections, friendships, political obligations, and expectations stretching back centuries. One famous family name could open doors that remained permanently closed to ordinary citizens. A young aristocrat introducing himself did not simply present his own identity. He carried the reputation of generations behind him. This explains why Roman elites guarded family honor so fiercely. Scandal endangered more than personal reputation. It threatened the entire dynasty. If one member behaved dishonorably, political enemies quickly exploited the opportunity. Rumors spread through the forum. Public speeches emphasized moral decline. Supporters became uncertain. Allies reconsidered their loyalties. One careless mistake could damage decades of careful work. As a result, noble families closely monitored one another. Parents guided children. Older relatives advised younger generations. Experienced politicians mentored ambitious nephews and cousins. Knowledge remained within the family whenever possible. Politics became an inherited profession. Roman fathers devoted enormous attention to preparing sons for public life. Education emphasized discipline above comfort. A future senator needed strong character, self-control, patience, confidence. He studied rhetoric until speaking before large crowds became natural. He learned Roman law because legal knowledge strengthened political authority. History provided examples of success and failure. Philosophy encouraged disciplined thinking. Military training prepared him for command. Nothing happened by accident. Every lesson served a purpose. The family invested years preparing each generation for leadership. Failure represented an expensive loss. Adoption became another fascinating feature of Roman dynasties. Unlike many modern societies, Romans often viewed adoption as a practical solution rather than an unusual event. If an influential family lacked a capable male heir, they might legally adopt a talented young relative or trusted associate. The adopted son assumed the family name, inherited property, continued religious traditions, and preserved the dynasty. Blood mattered greatly, but preserving the family itself mattered even more. This practice ensured continuity. Many famous Roman leaders reached prominence through adoption. The family survived because it adapted. Flexibility strengthened tradition rather than weakening it. Women also ensured continuity through education. Roman mothers taught children discipline, respect, and family values. Many supervised early education before tutors assumed greater responsibility. Elite mothers encouraged ambition while reminding children of their obligations. Ancient writers often praised women who produced honorable sons. In Roman thinking, raising capable future leaders represented one of the greatest contributions a noblewoman could make. Large households further expanded family influence. Elite homes included not only parents and children, but grandparents, cousins, freedmen, servants, teachers, secretaries, and countless clients visiting daily. Young aristocrats grew up surrounded by adults performing different roles within society. This environment taught practical lessons impossible to learn from books alone. By adulthood, many already understood administration, diplomacy, finance, and politics through observation. Family gatherings resembled political meetings. Important marriages were discussed. Business partnerships evaluated. Military appointments celebrated. Election strategies planned. Children absorbed these conversations naturally. Politics became part of everyday life. Perhaps the most dramatic demonstration of family prestige appeared during funerals. When an important aristocrat died, Rome witnessed ceremonies unlike anything else in the ancient world. Professional mourners walked through crowded streets. Musicians played solemn melodies. Friends, clients, political allies, military veterans, and ordinary citizens joined the procession. Most remarkable were the wax masks representing famous ancestors. Actors wore these masks, symbolically bringing earlier generations back to life. Imagine watching a funeral where great-grandfathers, legendary generals, former consuls, and celebrated heroes seemed to march together. The message was unmistakable. This family had served Rome for centuries. Its greatness did not begin with the man being buried, nor would it end with his death. Funeral speeches reinforced that message. Speakers praised not only the deceased, but generations of distinguished ancestors. Young listeners heard stories of courage, sacrifice, military victories, and political achievements. These public ceremonies strengthened family reputation. Even death became an opportunity to preserve influence. Roman aristocrats also maintained detailed records of family history. Achievements were remembered. Failures quietly forgotten whenever possible. Each generation inherited a carefully crafted narrative explaining why their family deserved respect. This historical memory became another political resource. During elections, candidates frequently reminded citizens of services performed by fathers and grandfathers. The argument was simple. A family that had faithfully served Rome before could be trusted to serve it again. Reputation accumulated like wealth. The older and more distinguished the family, the stronger its political foundation. Yet elite dynasties never felt completely secure. Competition remained relentless. New families sought advancement. Old rivals looked for weaknesses. Economic disasters threatened fortunes. Civil wars destroyed ancient houses. Disease sometimes claimed entire generations unexpectedly. Survival required constant vigilance. That vigilance produced remarkable resilience. Roman noble families adapted repeatedly. They arranged new marriages, built new alliances, adopted heirs, expanded estates, entered profitable businesses, supported rising political figures when necessary. Their greatest strength was not stubbornness. It was their ability to preserve tradition while adjusting to changing circumstances. This balance explains why some Roman family names remained influential for hundreds of years. They understood that lasting power depended upon more than one exceptional individual. It required institutions within the family itself, education, discipline, memory, planning. Responsibility. Every generation prepared the next. Every child represented another opportunity to continue the family story. For the Roman elite, history was never something that had already happened. It was something their descendants would continue writing. And they intended those descendants to write it from positions of power. But family prestige alone could not guarantee authority over millions of people. Rome's elite needed something even more powerful. They needed the approval of the gods, or at least the appearance of it. Religion would become one of the most effective tools ever used to strengthen political power, unite society, and convince ordinary Romans that the existing order reflected the will of heaven itself. How Rome's elite used faith to strengthen their power. In the modern world, politics and religion are often viewed as separate parts of society. In ancient Rome, they were almost impossible to separate. To a Roman citizen, the gods were not distant beings who watched the world from afar. They were active participants in everyday life. They controlled harvests, protected armies, guided travelers, blessed marriages, punished oath breakers, sent storms, ended droughts, brought victory, or delivered defeat. Every important decision carried a religious dimension. Before a general marched into battle, sacrifices were offered. Before an election, priests performed sacred rituals. Before a new temple was built, the gods were consulted. Before treaties were signed, religious ceremonies confirmed that the agreement had divine approval. Romans believed that ignoring the gods invited disaster. For Rome's elite, this belief created an extraordinary opportunity. If political authority appeared to have the support of the gods, challenging that authority became far more difficult. This did not necessarily mean that Roman leaders invented religion for political gain. Many genuinely believed in the gods. Many sincerely feared divine punishment. But they also understood that religious authority strengthened political authority. The two worked together. One supported the other. Among the highest honors a Roman aristocrat could receive was appointment to one of the great priesthoods. These positions were not reserved for isolated monks living apart from society. They were often held by senators, generals, and leading politicians. A man could command an army one year and preside over important religious ceremonies the next. The same individual represented both the state and the sacred traditions of Rome. This combination increased public trust. Citizens saw experienced leaders performing ancient rituals exactly as their ancestors had done. The message was subtle but powerful. The people governing Rome were also protecting its relationship with the gods. Tradition became a source of legitimacy. One of the most respected religious offices was that of the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. Although it was a religious title, it carried enormous political influence. The holder supervised many public ceremonies, maintained sacred calendars, interpreted religious law, and oversaw important priesthoods. Centuries later, even Roman emperors eagerly sought this position. They understood that controlling religious life strengthened their overall authority. Julius Caesar himself became Pontifex Maximus long before he became Rome's most powerful political figure. It was no coincidence. He recognized that religion could shape public opinion just as effectively as military victories. Religious festivals also played a vital role. Throughout the year, Rome celebrated countless ceremonies honoring different gods. The streets filled with music. Processions moved through the city. Temples overflowed with worshipers. Public sacrifices brought communities together. Elite families often sponsored these festivals. They paid for decorations, organized celebrations, distributed food, financed games. Ordinary citizens associated these joyful occasions with the generosity of influential families. Religion and reputation became inseparable. When people thanked the gods for a successful festival, they often remembered the noble household that had made it possible. Again, generosity produced loyalty, but this time it carried divine approval. Temples themselves reflected elite influence. Constructing a magnificent temple required enormous wealth. Only the richest citizens could afford such projects. Whenever a successful general returned from war, he might dedicate part of his captured treasure to building a new sanctuary. The temple honored the gods. It also permanently displayed the donor's name. Every visitor remembered who had fulfilled that sacred promise. Even centuries later, ruined temples across the former Roman world still bear inscriptions celebrating the aristocrats who built them. Religion became architecture. Architecture became memory. Memory became power. Another fascinating aspect of Roman religion involved the interpretation of signs from the gods. Before many important decisions, specially trained priests known as augurs observed the flight of birds. Others examined the internal organs of sacrificed animals. To modern readers, these practices may seem mysterious, yet Romans took them extremely seriously. If the signs appeared unfavorable, military campaigns might be delayed, political meetings postponed, public ceremonies rescheduled. The gods had spoken, or so people believed. Because elite priests often supervised these rituals, they possessed considerable influence over public events. A delayed election, a postponed assembly, a canceled ceremony. Religious interpretation sometimes affected political outcomes in subtle but significant ways. Whether motivated by sincere belief or political calculation, the results shaped Roman history. The elite also connected themselves to legendary heroes and divine ancestors. Some aristocratic families claimed descent from famous figures of Roman mythology. The family of Julius Caesar famously traced its ancestry to Venus, the goddess of love, through the Trojan hero Aeneas and his son Iulus. Such claims elevated ordinary political competition into something much grander. If a family descended from divine beings, their leadership seemed almost destined. These stories strengthened prestige. Ordinary citizens admired noble bloodlines already. Divine ancestry elevated them even further. Religion also reinforced moral expectations. Roman leaders constantly spoke about virtues such as duty, honor, discipline, loyalty, courage, respect for parents, respect for ancestors, respect for the gods. These values formed the foundation of Roman identity. Politicians frequently presented themselves as defenders of traditional morality. When criticizing opponents, they often accused them not merely of poor leadership, but of offending ancient customs and sacred traditions. Political debates became moral debates. A candidate who appeared irreligious risked losing public trust. No ambitious aristocrat could ignore the importance of religious reputation. Women played important roles within Roman religious life as well. One of the most famous examples was the Vestal Virgins. Chosen from noble families while still children, they dedicated themselves to serving the goddess Vesta. Their sacred duty was to maintain the eternal flame representing the safety of Rome itself. If that fire ever went out, many believed disaster threatened the entire city. The Vestals enjoyed remarkable privileges. They could own property, free condemned prisoners under certain circumstances, travel with special protection, receive extraordinary respect. Their position demonstrated that religion offered elite women unique forms of public influence, unavailable elsewhere in Roman society. Foreign religions gradually entered Rome as the empire expanded. Egyptian gods, Eastern mystery cults, new philosophical beliefs. Roman leaders often responded cautiously. Some foreign practices were welcomed, others were restricted. The Senate repeatedly debated which religious traditions supported Roman stability and which threatened it. Religion therefore became another area where political authority determined acceptable public behavior. Maintaining unity mattered greatly. An empire stretching across 3 continents contained countless languages, cultures, and traditions. Shared religious ceremonies helped create a common Roman identity. Citizens from Spain, Gaul, North Africa, Greece, and Asia Minor could participate in similar rituals honoring Rome and its gods. These ceremonies reminded everyone that they belonged to something larger than their local communities. Religion strengthened imperial unity. Military religion offered another powerful example. Legions carried sacred standards into battle. Soldiers swore solemn oaths. Victories were celebrated with sacrifices. Defeats prompted prayers for forgiveness and renewed divine favor. Commanders who appeared favored by the gods inspired greater confidence among their troops. Success reinforced belief. Belief encouraged loyalty. Loyalty strengthened military discipline. Everything connected. Even natural disasters possessed political meaning. If floods destroyed crops, if earthquakes shook cities, if disease spread through the population, many Romans wondered whether the gods were angry. Political leaders responded by organizing additional sacrifices, public prayers, or religious festivals. Visible devotion reassured anxious citizens. The elite presented themselves as guardians, restoring harmony between Rome and heaven. Of course, religion could also become dangerous. If influential priests supported rival politicians, conflicts intensified. If prophecies inspired public fear, unrest followed. Some charismatic religious leaders attracted enormous followings beyond traditional aristocratic control. The Roman elite remained alert to these possibilities. They encouraged religious practices that strengthened social order, while discouraging movements they believed threatened stability. Throughout the Republic and later the Empire, religion remained one of the most effective instruments supporting elite authority. It rarely relied upon force. Instead, it appealed to belief, tradition, memory, shared identity. People obeyed not only because powerful families possessed wealth and armies. They obeyed because many sincerely believed Rome flourished when its ancient customs were respected and its gods properly honored. For generations, this combination proved extraordinarily successful. The Senate gained prestige. Aristocratic families gained legitimacy. Military victories seemed divinely approved. Public festivals united the population. Religious ceremonies reminded everyone that Rome's greatness depended upon maintaining the established order. Yet one path to power surpassed even wealth: family prestige and religious influence. Military glory. A single victorious campaign could transform an ambitious noble into the most celebrated man in the Republic. It could fill his treasury with unimaginable riches, win him the loyalty of thousands of hardened soldiers, and make ordinary citizens believe that no one was more worthy of leading Rome. For the Roman elite, the battlefield was not only a place of war. It was the greatest stage upon which political careers were built, how Rome's elite turned victory on the battlefield into political power. For most civilizations, war was a necessity. For Rome's elite, it was also an opportunity. Every campaign offered the possibility of glory. Every victory promised wealth. Every conquered province expanded influence. Every successful general returned home with something that no amount of inherited prestige could provide: living proof of greatness. In the Roman Republic, military success was more than an achievement. It was a political weapon. A young aristocrat who dreamed of becoming one of Rome's greatest leaders understood that speeches alone would never be enough. He needed victories. He needed stories that people would remember. He needed soldiers who would speak his name with admiration. He needed enemies who feared him. Only then could he hope to compete with the most powerful families in Rome. Military service was expected of noble young men from an early age. Before they could govern provinces or debate laws in the Senate, they had to prove themselves on campaign. War was considered a classroom. It tested courage, discipline, leadership, patience, and endurance. A commander who could not lead men through danger was unlikely to earn respect in politics. Roman society admired military excellence above almost every other achievement. Children grew up hearing stories of legendary commanders who had defended the Republic against impossible odds. Families proudly displayed weapons captured in famous battles. Ancestors who had died protecting Rome were remembered with honor. Courage became part of family identity. Every generation was expected to live up to those examples. The battlefield offered something politics often could not: clear victories. A debate in the Senate could end without a decisive winner. An election might be controversial, but when a Roman army defeated its enemies, the result was unmistakable. Victory silenced critics. Success created momentum. Momentum attracted supporters. As Rome expanded across Italy and then across the Mediterranean, military opportunities multiplied. Campaigns took Roman armies into Spain, Gaul, Greece, North Africa, Asia Minor, the Middle East. Each conquest brought unimaginable wealth back to Rome. Gold, silver, jewelry, works of art, livestock, grain, and countless enslaved people. The commander responsible for those victories often received an enormous share of the rewards. His fortune increased dramatically. His family's prestige rose even higher. His political future became brighter. Ordinary citizens celebrated victorious generals as national heroes. Crowds gathered outside the city gates, temples filled with prayers of thanksgiving. Songs praised military achievements. Children watched processions with amazement. The greatest honor a Roman general could receive was the triumph. A triumph was far more than a parade. It was one of the most magnificent public ceremonies in the ancient world. The victorious commander entered Rome riding in a splendid chariot. His face was sometimes painted red to resemble the supreme god Jupiter. He wore richly decorated robes, unlike those worn on ordinary days. Behind him marched thousands of soldiers. Captured treasures filled wagon after wagon. Exotic animals amazed the crowds. Prisoners captured during the campaign were displayed before the cheering population. Paintings illustrated important battles. Rare treasures from distant lands glittered beneath the Mediterranean sun. The streets echoed with celebration. For one extraordinary day, the general became the center of Roman attention. People remembered these spectacles for the rest of their lives. Children who witnessed a triumph often dreamed of earning one themselves. The ceremony transformed military success into political influence. Every citizen saw the victorious commander. Every citizen associated his name with strength. Every citizen remembered that he had expanded Rome's greatness. No speech could compete with such powerful imagery. Yet there was an interesting reminder hidden within every triumph. According to ancient tradition, a servant stood behind the victorious general in the chariot. As the crowds shouted his name, the servant quietly reminded him that he was still mortal. Whether every triumph included this practice remains debated by historians, but the story itself reveals something important. Romans admired greatness. They also feared excessive pride. No individual was supposed to rise above the republic, at least in theory. Reality proved more complicated. As Rome conquered larger territories, generals gained command over increasingly massive armies. Legionaries served under the same commanders for years. They marched together, fought together, survived together, shared hunger, shared exhaustion, shared victory. These experiences created extraordinary loyalty. Soldiers often trusted their commander more than distant politicians in Rome. A wise general understood this. He shared hardships with his men. He rewarded bravery He praised discipline. He distributed captured wealth fairly. He remembered individual acts of courage. Such gestures strengthened personal loyalty. Many soldiers became devoted not merely to Rome, but to the man leading them. This gradual shift carried enormous political consequences. A commander returning home with thousands of loyal veterans possessed influence beyond anything earlier generations had imagined. Those veterans voted, spoke proudly of their leader, supported his political ambitions. Some even followed him into civil conflicts against rival Romans. Military loyalty became political loyalty. No one demonstrated this more dramatically than Gaius Marius. Born outside the oldest aristocratic families, Marius rose through military achievement rather than ancient ancestry. His victories made him enormously popular. His reforms transformed the Roman army. He recruited poorer citizens who increasingly depended upon successful commanders for land and rewards after military service. This strengthened the personal bond between soldiers and generals. The long-term effects were profound. Later commanders inherited armies whose loyalty often belonged first to their leader, then to the Republic. Among those who learned from this changing system was Lucius Cornelius Sulla. He marched his own army against Rome itself. It was almost unthinkable. Roman soldiers had always defended the Republic. Now they entered the city as instruments of political ambition. The balance of power had changed forever. The Senate could debate. The courts could judge. But an experienced general, commanding loyal legions, possessed a kind of authority no speech could easily overcome. The greatest example, of course, was Julius Caesar. During his campaigns in Gaul, Caesar spent nearly a decade leading his armies through relentless warfare. His soldiers admired him deeply. He fought beside them, shared dangers, rewarded success, remembered courage. When political conflict erupted between Caesar and the Senate, many of his legionaries followed him without hesitation. Their loyalty altered history. The crossing of the Rubicon River became one of history's most famous moments. It symbolized something larger than one man's ambition. It revealed that military glory had become powerful enough to challenge Rome's oldest political institutions. For centuries, the elite had relied upon family prestige, political alliances, religious authority, economic influence. Now military success threatened to overshadow them all. Yet most aristocratic families continued encouraging military careers. The rewards remained too great to ignore. A victorious campaign still opened doors unavailable through any other path. Elite education reflected this reality. Young nobles studied famous battles, read biographies of celebrated commanders, practiced riding horses, learned military engineering, studied logistics. Discipline became central to their upbringing. Rome expected its leaders to command armies as naturally as they delivered speeches. Military courage enhanced every political career. Defeat, however, could destroy it. A disastrous campaign damaged reputation. Lost soldiers meant grieving families. Political enemies exploited every mistake. Success required both bravery and judgment. Not every commander possessed both. Some ambitious nobles rushed into unnecessary conflicts hoping for quick glory. Others underestimated experienced enemies. Rome celebrated winners. It rarely forgave failures. Military success also reshaped Roman society economically. Victorious generals often established colonies where retired veterans received farmland. These settlements spread Roman culture into newly conquered territories. Veterans remained loyal to the commanders who had rewarded them. Their prosperity strengthened political networks across Italy and beyond. Land grants created lifelong gratitude. Again, military victory generated political influence through personal loyalty. The cycle repeated itself. Win battles, gain wealth, reward soldiers, increase popularity, win elections, secure greater commands, achieve even larger victories. For exceptionally talented individuals, the process became unstoppable. Ordinary Romans admired these heroic figures. Many genuinely believed great commanders protected the republic. Others worried that no republic could survive if individual generals became more powerful than the institutions they served. Both views contained truth. Military glory made Rome an empire. It also weakened the political balance that had sustained the republic for centuries. The elite celebrated successful generals because victory enriched everyone. Yet each great commander carried the potential to become something unprecedented. A leader whose personal fame exceeded the authority of the Senate itself. Rome's ruling class had mastered wealth, family influence, religion, politics, patronage. But controlling military ambition proved far more difficult. Once an ambitious noble commanded thousands of loyal soldiers, the old rules no longer seemed unbreakable. And as Rome entered the final century of the Republic, another battlefield became just as important as the fields of war. The battlefield of public opinion. There, elections were won not only with ideas, but with speeches, favors, promises, generosity, and carefully crafted images. The struggle for votes would reveal another secret of how Rome's elite remained in power for so long. Why their power still echoes through history. Every empire believes, at least for a time, that it will last forever. Its leaders imagine that future generations will continue the traditions they created. Its citizens grow accustomed to stability. Its rulers begin to believe that their position is permanent. Ancient Rome was no different. For centuries, the Roman elite stood at the center of one of the greatest civilizations the world had ever known. They governed vast provinces stretching from the misty hills of Britain to the deserts of North Africa, from the Atlantic Ocean to the rivers of the Near East. They commanded millions of people, collected enormous wealth, built magnificent cities, raised powerful armies, created laws that outlived their own civilization. To many Romans, it seemed impossible that such a system could ever disappear. Yet history teaches a different lesson. No system of power, no matter how sophisticated, remains unchanged forever. The Roman elite had mastered almost every instrument of influence imaginable. They controlled wealth. They controlled land. They dominated the Senate. They built dynasties that lasted for generations. They shaped religion. They commanded armies, they rewarded loyalty through patronage, they carefully protected their public image. They educated their children from birth to lead. They surrounded themselves with traditions that made their authority appear natural. For hundreds of years, these methods worked remarkably well. They transformed a small Italian city into an empire that reshaped the ancient world. But success created new problems. As Rome expanded, governing became more difficult. The distance between rulers and ordinary people grew wider. Power became increasingly concentrated. Competition among ambitious elites became more dangerous. Generals commanded armies more loyal to them than to the state. Political rivalries became civil wars. Emperors replaced elected magistrates. Old republican traditions slowly faded. Even then, the elite did not disappear. They adapted. Once again, adaptation became their greatest strength. Families that had dominated the republic learned how to survive under emperors. Instead of competing openly for the highest office, they sought imperial favor. Instead of shaping elections, they influenced the imperial court. Instead of controlling the republic, they helped administer the empire. The methods changed. The objective remained the same: preserve influence, protect wealth, ensure that future generations inherited power. Some families succeeded brilliantly. Others vanished into history. Yet the system itself endured for centuries because it constantly adjusted to changing realities. That flexibility explains why Roman civilization lasted so long. Still, adaptation could not solve every problem. Economic pressures increased. Heavy taxation burdened many provinces. Corruption weakened public confidence. Military expenses grew larger every generation. Frontiers became harder to defend. Foreign invasions intensified. Internal struggles divided the empire. No ruling class, however capable, could solve every challenge forever. Gradually, the Western Roman Empire weakened. Cities declined. Trade slowed. Political authority fragmented. Ancient institutions that had once seemed eternal began to disappear. The Senate lost much of its influence. Old aristocratic families faded. Magnificent villas were abandoned. Public monuments crumbled. The empire that had once ruled the Mediterranean became a memory. And yet, Rome never truly vanished. Its armies disappeared. Its emperors fell. Its political institutions changed beyond recognition. But its ideas survived. Roman law became the foundation of legal systems across much of Europe. Roman engineering inspired generations of builders. Roman roads shaped trade routes for centuries. Roman architecture influenced governments, churches, and public buildings around the world. The Latin language evolved into Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, and influenced English vocabulary more than almost any other ancient language. Even the idea that public service should be guided by law rather than personal whim owes much to Roman political thought. Most remarkably, many of the methods used by Rome's elite remain familiar today. Political families still exist. Reputation still matters. Education continues to shape leadership. Personal networks remain valuable. Public image influences elections. Large public projects build popularity. Military success can transform political careers. Wealth often creates opportunities unavailable to others. The tools have changed. The principles often remain surprisingly similar. This does not mean the modern world is ancient Rome. History never repeats itself exactly, but human ambition changes very little. People continue to seek influence. Communities continue to admire successful leaders. Families continue to hope that future generations will build upon their achievements. Rome understood these human desires better than almost any civilization before it. That understanding became one of its greatest strengths. Perhaps the most important lesson left by Rome's elite is neither admiration nor criticism. It is perspective. Power is never maintained by force alone. It survives through institutions, through culture, through education, through shared beliefs, through loyalty, through reputation, through the ability to convince society that existing leadership serves a greater purpose. Rome mastered these principles for centuries. Eventually, changing circumstances overwhelmed even that remarkable system. Yet its legacy endured because the ideas proved stronger than the empire itself. Today, tourists walk through the ruins of the Roman Forum. They stand inside ancient amphitheaters. They admire weathered temples. They trace their fingers across Latin inscriptions carved into stone nearly 2,000 years ago. The buildings are broken. The marble has faded. The voices of senators and emperors have long since fallen silent, but the questions they wrestled with remain alive. How should power be earned? Who deserves to lead? How can a society balance tradition with change? How much influence should wealth provide? Can institutions remain stronger than individuals? These questions did not disappear with Rome. They continue to shape nations across the world. In that sense, the Roman elite achieved something extraordinary. They did not remain in power forever. No one ever does. But they built institutions, traditions, and ideas that outlived their own civilization. That is why ancient Rome still fascinates us. Not simply because it conquered vast territories, not because it built magnificent monuments, not because it produced legendary generals or famous emperors, but because it revealed timeless truths about power itself. Power is carefully constructed, carefully protected, carefully passed from one generation to the next. And eventually, no matter how mighty an empire becomes, no matter how wealthy its rulers grow, no matter how powerful its armies appear, history reminds every civilization of the same unavoidable truth. Empires rise, empires flourish, empires change, empires fall, but the lessons they leave behind can shape humanity forever. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy of Rome's elite. They lost their empire, but they never lost their place in history.